For hope on several frustrating running backs for 2020 in fantasy football. Week 14 was probably a good week for you. We had Cam Akers going nuts on Thursday Night Football. Then we saw the solidification of Jonathan Taylor's role, Miles Sanders reborn, Alvin Kamara reborn. So a lot of big takeaways here for DFS. We got to discuss how to handle those guys going forward and what their breakouts mean. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, we got some fun running backs to discuss this week. How you doing?
Good. Not as good as you. You had a nice solid day. You won our snakes draft competition. No, I didn't. I was hoping to clinch it, but did not happen.
So we're going to go into the final week. Brandon has 4 wins. You have 5. You have 5. I have 4, and JJ Zachariason has 4. So week 15, which is our final snake draft, actually will decide how this thing breaks. The tiebreaker I've decided is who won the first 3 weeks. If they are tied for the win, even if they're not tied, like even if it's just kind of close, I think that they should be the winner. So that's my proposal at least, and I will hear no rebuttals if that's okay.
I just like that I can't lose because like either you or JJ could end up with 4 while the other 2 guys have 5. I can't lose. That makes me feel good, but I can also beat you guys by 2, which would feel great as well.
Yeah, you feel great for whom? For not me. And again, my feelings are the ones that matter here. So I'm going to go ahead and disagree with that personally. But it should be a fun one. We're going to have that snake draft on Friday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope pages. So make sure you are subscribed there, and we'll be doing the snake draft live on air. And then hopefully getting me my 5th and clinching victory. I'm just going to go with the clinching thing because why not? I feel like it. But I think, Brandon, it's fun when we have more relevant running backs in DFS.
Yes.
And I think that in this week, there were – I mean, obviously, if Cam Akers had been on the main slate, we would have considered him. We used Jonathan Taylor on the main slate. So, like, they were in consideration, but their stock went up. And Miles Sanders and Alvin Kamara were, I don't think, at least to me, on the radar, but now they will be. And I think it's good to have more options for us in DFS. So I thought that week 14 was a good one from that perspective.
Yeah, more options is always good, especially because we have some standout wide receivers. And historically, we pay up a running back and then we can't play the stud receivers. But if we can get some really good workloads for lower salaried backs, then we can kind of vary our roster construction. We saw this week. I'm pretty sure only one quarterback got to 30 points, which is something that we talked about. We need upside, and it didn't really pan out. So kind of got a lot of the production from these mid-salaried running backs.
Yeah, and the high-salaried receivers were good. Shocker. It's nice. It's nice to, like you said, have the flexibility to use Tyreek Hill and Davonte Adams when we can. And I think that's a fun thing for sure. So let's start things off here with Thursday Night Football, the Cam Akers game against the Patriots. And obviously he'll be the big takeaway here. Brandon, what are the deeper numbers under Cam Akers' big game on Thursday night?
Yeah, second straight game for him with a big workload. Played 79% of the snaps, according to NFL.com, after getting 63% a week ago. He had 29 carries for 171 yards, 3 targets for 23 yards. Didn't score. But that's a dominant workload. It works out to 35 adjusted opportunities, which is a number that we use on this podcast, which is your carries plus 2x your targets, because on average, you get twice as many FanDuel points for a running back for a target than you do on a carry on FanDuel, even though it's half PPR, because catches are...
Those yards still count just the same.
Points. Yeah, they're yards, and it's easier to gain yardage on a catch than a rush, so it matters.
Shocker, man.
He now has 50 carries and 4 targets over the past 2 games in these big workloads. Really good snap rates, or especially what we saw in Week 14. 63% doesn't necessarily get me excited, but 79% sure does. So Akers is in a really good spot moving forward. Gives us another running back we can roster, and just we dig into the data here, but watching that game, he was just kind of untouched. So it was really promising there. Because of the game flow, the Rams threw just 25 passes compared to their 36 rushes. So volume was down for the pass catchers, but Robert Woods still got 8 of their 25 targets. Cooper Kupp had 5 of them, did score, but nobody had more than 34 yards. If you look at this team since their Week 9 bye, Jared Goff has been league average per dropback based on numberFire's metrics, but does have a good success rate, 5 touchdowns to 5 picks. He just hasn't had to do a whole lot, and if they're going to be able to ride Cam Akers, he might have to do a little bit less even. Since that bye, Robert Woods now has 27% of the team's targets, just a 5.3 yard average depth of target, or ADOT, but that's 10.4 targets per game, just minimal deep work on those right now. Kupp has 21% of the targets. He's at a 5.7 yard ADOT, even less deep work than Woods has in that sample. And then Josh Reynolds has 14% of the targets to be a distant third on the team in market share. Played 56% of the snaps this week compared to 30% for Van Jefferson. So that's relevant if this team's ever, on a smaller slate. So I'm ranking them Woods, Kupp, Reynolds right now. It kind of was Kupp, Woods, Van Jefferson for a bit, but I think we need to reshuffle that. They host the Jets next week, so main slate's not posted yet, but I would imagine Cam Akers probably 10K.
It's up now. Sorry.
Oh, it is? Wow.
Yeah.
Look at that time.
So I would like you to guess that salary on Akers before we get to the Patriots.
This is going to be so hard because it was such a good workload, but I don't want to get out ahead of myself. It's a great matchup.
It's not the ideal game script for us because we want more of a back and forth type thing. At least I do, even at running backs.
We didn't get it this week.
That's true. I want those fourth quarter targets though, and
sure.
It's tougher to envision those against when they're 17-point favorites, justifiably 17-point favorites against the Jets.
This could be anything because I don't even know what his salary would have been on the main slate for this week.
Right.
I'm going to say 8,000.
Okay. I was thinking 77.
Okay.
So I think that we're both in the same ballpark here. I accidentally saw some others. Oh my. He is $6,700.
Okay.
I can overlook some game script concerns if he's $6,700.
Yeah.
So I think that is.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to have a great floor, I think. We can say that, right?
Even if you scale back the snaps from 79 to like 63% in such a good matchup with how good he's looked, there's a floor. Yep. All right.
So I think he'll be a focal point for Thursday.
Yeah. I'll talk about the Patriots, not in depth because there's not a whole lot here. They're just not a good DFS team at this point. Over the past 5 weeks, in the first half, they're 20th in pace and last in pass rate. And according to my data, they're not just last in pass rate, but they're at 38%. Only one other team's below 49.6%. They want to run the ball and like ruin games. They choose to, Jim. They're choosing to do this.
Yeah.
So
it's upsetting.
Even if we cherry pick Cam Newton's turnaround that came in week 8 and look at him since then, he has had 3 elite games from an efficiency standpoint, but he's now at 0.07 passing net expected points per dropback overall. League average this year is 0.14, so he's half of that. And again, this is kind of his bet. I mean, it's from when he turned things around through then, so it's like kind of a large sample, but it's not even just including all of his bad games. No skill position player, top 51 yards, and there's just really nothing we can target. Damian Harris did hurt his back, but I mean, honestly, even if he's out, they still have so many backs that they use. So I think this team is completely unusable. They're at the Dolphins next week, which is like a top 3 adjusted pass defense, and kind of they didn't shut down Patrick Mahomes, but they caused some problems. So I think this team is just off the map.
Yeah, we'll talk about this in the Chiefs recap, but like the Chiefs are kind of the one team I'm willing to use against the Dolphins. Patriots ain't that. But I think that the Rams next week against the Jets will basically be just Cam Akers, just because the way that game could play out. So, like, Russell Wilson had 4 touchdowns on Sunday, but still didn't have 24 FanDuel points. Like, that's why we want back and forth games. So it'll be Cam Akers, but he'll be definitely someone we'll be talking about Thursday. Not the ideal script, but like still obviously a rock star level play. In the Week 14 FanDuel Podcast Network Listener League, Cookerman59 got the win with a score of 169.32. They stacked Patrick Mahomes with both Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce while flexing Mike Gesicki Double tight ends. I love it. They also got contributions from Jonathan Taylor and the Cowboys defense to get the win. The Week 15 Listener League should be posted shortly. As always, it's a $5 entry with 3 entries max and no rake. To enter once it is up, go to FanDuel.com/league/listener league. FanDuel.com/league/listener league. There we go. I'll also have a link to it in the Week 14 recap podcast post up on numberFire.com. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's talk here about Houston at Chicago. Another running back solidifying himself as being a legit option is David Montgomery, who continued to completely erupt. He had 155 yards in scrimmage, including an 80-yard touchdown. He had just 11 carries and 4 targets, but that's sometimes a side effect when you rip off huge runs. Like, I'm not going to nitpick his workload here when he goes for $155. He did lose 6 carries to Cordell Patterson, but I see no issues with his usage. The stock is already high on him, but I think that I would say that the stock is the same, but I mean that in a complimentary way because we were high on Montgomery coming into this week. It also does help that Mitchell Trubisky played well. He finished with 0.34 passing net expected points per dropback. That was against a terrible Texans defense, so take it with a grain of salt. But in 3 games with Trubisky back as a starter, he's been about league average, 0.17 passing net expected points per dropback. That's not bad. It's like we've been saying for this entire time. This is an upgrade from Nick Foles, and it means we can be into the Bears for plus matchups like this one. I would just be hesitant to get overconfident beyond that when they face tougher teams who are not the Texans and the Lions. Deshaun Watson took a shot to the groin and predictably struggled here, but it also wasn't as bad as the score would indicate. He had 0.09 passing net expected points per dropback. That's bad for him, but that's not that bad when you consider the circumstance with no Brandon Cooks, no Will Fuller. It's hard to do better than that in those situations. So if Cooks is able to come back, I will be good going back to Deshaun Watson. Kiki Cutie scored early. Got pretty excited about that, but that was about it for him. Actually lost a fumble later, so he went backwards. Finished with just 3 targets. Chad Hansen had 7 for the second consecutive game. Stephen Mitchell led with 42 routes run and had 5 targets. I'm still going to put Cutie as the number 2 behind Cooks if we assume Cooks is good to go next week. But Hansen is becoming more and more viable because he's basically playing kind of the Will Fuller role without the same Will Fuller volume. Mitchell would be an option if Cooks were to miss more time. Jordan Akins, always seems close to being good, but never quite gets there. He's still running routes on just half the dropbacks.
Did you see touchdown? Yeah. Did you see his end zone target?
Oh, he lost it in the lights.
Yeah.
Or the sun, it looked like. Yeah. If he hadn't had the issues on Thanksgiving with end zone targets, I might be able to shrug it off, but it's hard to get a bigger role when you're doing that. And his role went down from where it was last week. So I think the odds of Akins getting less work going forward are higher than his odds of getting more work. So I'm okay abandoning ship on Jordan Akins. With the game out of hand, Duke Johnson took a backseat in the second half. He lost work to Buddy Howell. Howell had 11 carries. Duke had 8 with 2 targets. I would not be shocked if they were to get either Howell or Scotty Phillips run down the stretch. We can still avoid Duke even if David misses more time. So I do think that for me, at least, I'm okay continuing to be out on the Texans backfield. Also with regards to the Chicago passing game, with Trubisky being more relevant, I think it's noteworthy that Cole Kmet had 7 targets once again. He had 7 targets week 13. Actually showed some yardage this week because he had a deep target. Actually, he didn't have a deep target. Cordell Patterson did. But I think the overall point is that Kmet is kind of solidifying himself as being an actual option. I was skeptical of the yardage upside, which led to wishy-washy exposure for me this week, but I had enough where it was fine. I will be upping that next week, given that the role seems to be solidifying here. But Brandon, I want to ask you about David Montgomery because, we've seen this for a while now, and we've seen more upside recently. I think that was the main question with David Montgomery was, did he have the upside we needed? They get Minnesota next week. Minnesota is a non-threatening matchup. Name that salary for David Montgomery next week.
The first thought that popped in my head was 75. So I'll just go with that. I would imagine he's closer to 7, but I think in that range somewhere.
I think I'd be closer to 72, personally, just because I don't have full faith in the offense yet, and that's kind of it's not about the role for Montgomery. It's about the offense. He's 73, so he's right in line. I think that we Cam Akers more relative to his salary, right?
So, Yeah, but every time I do this and say I already know Cam Akers' salary is
No, I'm saying that like it's not about that. I'm saying now that we know both their salaries,
yes,
we like Cam Akers more relative to his salary, right?
yeah.
Okay, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
Let's move then to Dallas at Cincinnati. The Dolphins. What? Yeah.
Game of the week.
I almost said the Dolphins. I was thinking Andy Dalton. Andy Dolphin gets the revenge here. Getting the win for the Cowboys, and the Bengals offense continues to be hapless. Like, I think people use Gio on Sunday. Don't use Bengals players in DFS right now.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes players in bad offenses can pan out, but the odds that they do that are very low, especially a running back, because you need efficiency as a running back you need volume, but like you need some efficiency and you need to score touchdowns. So, I mean, if you don't have that, it's kind of tough, and we didn't really have that from either side of the ball in this game. But I'll start with Andy Dalton as a passer. 25 dropbacks, and the Cowboys had 25 run plays, so it was a 50-50 split there on low volume. And nobody had more than 6 targets, which was Michael Gallup. Nobody had more than 51 yards. That was Amari Cooper. Cooper had 5 targets for 51 yards and a touchdown. If you look at this team, since Andy Dalton came back in week 11, he himself is at 0.10 passing net expected points per drop back, which is just off the league average of 0.14. He has 8 touchdowns to 3 picks. The success rate's above average. It's okay. But his downfield attempt rate is like 12%. The NFL average is around 17%. There's just not like a lot of juice in this offense, not a whole lot that can scare you. In this span, actually, our boy, some vindication here, Michael Gallup leads with 23% of the targets. His ADOT is 10.4 yards downfield. He's averaging a combined 3.0 high leverage targets per game over the past 4, which for me are downfield targets and red zone targets, because if you compare those to just non-red zone and like shorter targets, that's where a lot of the fantasy points come from. Amari Cooper has 21% of the targets, so he's not that far off. CeeDee Lamb's at 17%, so it's not terrible, but if the efficiency is not great, you kind of need some more volume there. I would still lean Amari Cooper if I had to pick one, if I had to play one, just because he's been like off the charts efficient from Andy Dalton, but I think Michael Gallup's back up to number 2. For me, because of his usage, not that it really matters. Ezekiel Elliott had 12 carries, 3 targets, just 59 total yards. Tony Pollard had 11 carries, 2 targets for 48 total yards, and had a receiving touchdown. Zeke played 63% of snaps. He's been living in that 60% range, just kind of teetering around 65% for the past few weeks now. And like I said, there's not a whole lot of offensive firepower. They won this game by 23. He didn't do a whole lot, so I don't know what else you would expect from him. The Cowboys play the 49ers next week, so probably just going to scratch that one off at this point. The Bengals starting quarterback, Brandon Allen, hurt his leg, left toward the end of the game. We would probably see Ryan Finley take over. I don't have any idea how bad the injury is, but the initial reaction was that it doesn't matter, but actually Allen was at least okay in this game, kind of efficient from a net expected points standpoint. He's now at negative 0.1 passing net expected points per drop back on the season. Finley's at like negative 0.5 in his career, so this would actually be a huge downgrade. I don't really need to get into too much else. Giovanni Bernard fumbled early, wound up with 3 carries and 3 targets, played 24% of snaps, but even behind him, our boy Travion Williams, Samaje Perine, they didn't crack 40% of the snaps. And like T. Higgins has the best receiving workload of the guys, and they still kind of target like Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and AJ Green. So we know where the ball is going, but I don't think even T. Higgins can be relevant. Now, they are on Monday night, so like we'll have that single game action, but I think against the Steelers it might be some 4-1 stat.
Yeah. You mean 4 Bengals, right? 4 Bengals, 1 Steeler?
If you wanna win, yeah.
No, I don't want to win. I'd rather not play, to be fully honest. Yeah, I think that with the Cowboys, we've seen enough to know that like Zeke's workload's probably not going to bounce back this year. And like, why? I mean, like, it shouldn't. He's been fumbling way too much anyway. So I feel no need to go there. I'm guessing we've not seen enough from Michael Gallup to go there yet. It's more so just like we feel good about the volume, right?
I mean, it's not that dissimilar to like the Jets, where we will, if they were in the right spot, like if I like the 49ers next week, I'd say, well, there's some bring back options because we've seen some solid market shares in downfield work for Gallup and Cooper. Cooper's been very, very efficient with Andy Dalton, but that's really about it. And if they're playing a team like the 49ers, I'm not going to be like stacking that game. So I wouldn't have, if these games were on the main slate, I wouldn't have any of these two teams next week.
Yeah. I mean, like, Ayuk is interesting, at least in that game.
I meant the Bengals and Cowboys. Like,
no. Oh my gosh, no. I didn't have any. I had Cowboys defense, I guess. Like, does that count? No one else. Let's move here to an actually fun game.
Yeah.
The Dolphins against the Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes actually really struggled here, and the Chiefs still put up 30 points. I think that there are two takeaways from that. The first one is that the floor on the Chiefs is just insanely good. I know that you know that. I'm not breaking news here, but it's still fun how good their floor is when they're not at like 100%. And second, the Dolphins defense is legit. I was okay stacking the Chiefs here because they're the Chiefs, but there might not be another offense in football I do that with against them. Maybe like the Packers, I guess, but like it's not a long list by any means. And it was pretty similar story for Tyreek Hill, where he finally had fewer than 10 targets, but he still paid off because he had a 32-yard rushing touchdown. He had a long receiving touchdown. He's matchup proof, and so is Travis Kelce. Kelce, 10 targets, 2 deep, 1 in the red zone. He topped 20 FanDuel points for the 6th time this year. That's disgusting. So they're both awesome, and they're the only guys you can use in this offense. I mean, obviously, if it's like a single game slate, you can go to the other guys, but like on the Roto Grinders Pick 6 show every Wednesday, Rich Rebar uses the phrase ancillary jabronis. And I feel like we should start using that for every Chiefs player who is not Mahomes, Hill, or Kelce. That's
way better than when I say tertiary options.
Yeah, we're going to go with Rich and ancillary jabronis on that one. And the usage might make you think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire could be in that discussion too, but I'd be pretty careful with that. He had 16 carries and 6 targets, which is 28 adjusted opportunities, but he also had 32 yards rushing on those 16 carries. And like, I don't know if this is like watching the film bias, bro, but like he looked bad. We know they want to pass. Le'Veon Bell and Darrell Williams are mixing in a bit. They could do that more if CEH keeps struggling. So I just keep it to Tyreek and Kelce here. Don't overthink it. We're going to use a lot of them next week against the Saints, but like everyone else just kind of dust. The Dolphins covered here, which I'm happy about. I think I was the only one based on Twitter. You know, it was a little fluky, but I'll take it. But they had some big injuries. Both Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki left with injuries. Gesicki's looked pretty bad when it happened. They also lost Shaquem Grant, though his seemed less severe. If those guys miss time, it's a major, major downgrade for the entire offense. They would be without their 3 best pass catchers, so that hurt Tua Tagovailoa and everybody else. So I'm hoping Gesicki and Parker are okay. Grant too, obviously. But it would be a downgrade to everyone if they're not. It would allow us to use Lynn Bowden, though, and I like Lynn Bowden a lot. He led the team with 9 targets. 3 of those were deep. He would be the next guy up if they were to miss time. I'd be willing to use him even if Grant is able to play. Like if we have no Gesicki and no Parker, I can use Lynn Bowden there. Brian Flores had some positive quotes about Lynn Bowden this week during practice, so they seem to like him. He's rewarding them with solid play, so I'm actually okay with Lynn Bowden, but he'd kind of be the one guy. The backfield matters less here because if the team's efficiency goes down, it doesn't matter as much, but DeAndre Washington had a pretty decent role before the end of the game got out of hand. He had 13 carries and 4 targets. That's 21 adjusted opportunities. It would have been higher, but in hurry-up mode late, Patrick Laird was on the field. That is worth noting for sure, and it does put a lid on Washington's appeal, but with Myles Gaskin likely out next week, I think it's 10 days after you test positive, Washington will be worth considering against the Patriots. We'll just have to keep an eye on the other injuries here as both Matt Breida and Savon Ahmed missed this game. If they come back, it's not a lock that Washington keeps that same workload, so proceed with caution with Washington to be the top guy here, but I am willing to consider Lynn Bowden. Brandon, am I just kind of, allowing my college bias towards Lynn Bowden to get the better of me here? Or do you think that he would actually be worthwhile if Parker and Gesicki were to miss time?
I could see it. Like you mentioned, the 3 downfield targets, 84 air yards. Mac Hollins, though, also had 9 targets, 2 downfield targets, 105 air yards. The Bowden's 84. I mean, I think the issue might be that, you might not know who it's going to be. And if the efficiency is not great and there's like a 1A, 1B, it's kind of hard to stack. But I could see it if we were in a spot where there would be any bring back potential, but they do play the Patriots next week. So it's kind of hard for me to get excited because I want to make sure I don't really play anyone against the Patriots.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. So let's move now to Minnesota at Tampa Bay. I like this game quite a bit. It was pretty bad. What did you see here, Brandon?
Yeah, not quite the shootout we were hoping for. I had this fear just because Tampa Bay was coming out of a bye, and that can kind of screw things up. But, I mean, 40 total points, 0 points in the first quarter, 3 points in the fourth quarter, which is just such a killer to watch. But the Buccaneers got their win coming out of their bye. Not a whole lot of volume. They had more rushes than passes. And Ronald Jones was the man with no Leonard Fournette. From a coach's decision, he didn't play. So that's relevant. Ronald Jones had 18 carries, 2 targets for 84 total yards and a touchdown. So if like Fournette's not a thing, Ronald Jones becomes a thing. So that's relevant. Wasn't an amazing game, but he didn't really get burnt at 6,300 using Ronald Jones. Tom Brady, once again, was kind of not great. 196 yards and 2 touchdowns on low volume. But the biggest issue for me is not like even Brady's efficiency necessarily, his downfield passing. I wanted to stack this game and I was building lineups and I was like, I don't know who necessarily to use. And I landed with mostly Mike Evans, but this team is just one of those where they can really spread things around, and that makes it difficult if Tom Brady's not going to be amazing. Scotty Miller had a 48-yard touchdown. Rob Gronkowski had the other touchdown, and we've seen Gronk be relevant, have some yardage, but he had 2 yards on 2 total targets. So it was a bad game if you used him. Nobody had more than 5 targets. That was Antonio Brown and Mike Evans. If you look at this team since week 9 with Antonio Brown, Mike Evans leads with a 21% target share with elite peripheral data, 2.4 downfield targets, 2.2 red zone targets per game. Behind him, it's kind of clustered, 18% of the targets for Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin. Gronk has now fallen to a 13% target share. All of those guys do get at least 1 downfield target per game in this sample, but for me, it's just really hard to build a Tom Brady lineup and not know where to go. There are 4 guys, and that's 2 at least too many. So that might be a personal flaw of mine, but I really hate stacking teams when I could just guess wrong at the receivers. Brady's data in this sample is 0.12 passing net expected points per dropbacks, and pretty close to the league average of 0.14. Just a tinge below in success rates, above average ADOT, but he's played some tough pass defenses in this sample, so I want to keep that in mind. And they play the Falcons next week in Atlanta, so I'm going to go back, but it is scary for me. Dalvin Cook's workload led to a solid game for him. 22 carries, 4 targets, 110 total yards, and a touchdown against the league's best rush defense. That's why Cook's salary is what it is. If you guys get this workload, he can pay off even without a touchdown, which we've seen a few times recently. But, I think he's kind of matchup-proof if he did this in this game. Kirk Cousins dropped back 43 times, but was sacked 6 times, had just 225 yards and a single touchdown to Irv Smith. Despite the heavy volume, too, weirdly, because this team doesn't do this much, the targets were kind of spread out. Justin Jefferson had 8. Tyler Conklin had 5. Adam Thielen had 4, same as Irv Smith. Since week 8, when Dalvin came back, but if you remove week 12 when Thielen missed, Jefferson has 24% of the targets, Thielen's at 23%, and Dalvin is at 15%. So we know where the ball's going generally. We didn't really see it this week. It could have been because Tampa Bay had the right game plan coming out of their bye, but if I had to pick between Jefferson and Thielen at this point, it's going to be Jefferson. Thielen has an amazing red zone role, but red zone targets are less bankable than like downfield targets and yardage upside, yardage floor. You can score long touchdowns. So I would put Jefferson over Thielen right now. Dalvin Cook's amazing. And I'm not really chasing Irv Smith, but that's kind of where I am with this team.
Yeah, I think that I talked myself into Jefferson over Thielen on the podcast on Thursday, and I'm sticking to that too. I think that's the right call there. Let's go back to the Tampa Bay passing, or let's go to Ronald Jones, actually.
Okay.
I think that, like, Bruce Arians is someone we should always be skeptical of. However, like, their actions actually backed up what he said this time with making Fournette a healthy scratch. And we have seen Ronald Jones play well when he's gotten volume in the past. Like you said, we don't know if this will be the case going forward. But, I mean, Atlanta's a tough rush defense. You want to pass the ball against them. But I think we could still, like, potentially be into Fournette for that spot. Or, sorry, Jones for that spot. So name that salary for Ronald Jones based on what we know right now.
I still have to be a little just skeptical in general. But also, he's not the focal point of the offense. He might just be the focal point in the backfield, but they can still, spread out the touchdowns. So I'd have a hard time going anything above 7,000 considering the rushing matchup. So that's probably where I'd put it.
I think I go 67. I'm weirdly lower than you today. This never happens.
Yeah.
67 from you. I'm always lower on Ronald Jones, though, than just like the general consensus because I don't trust Bruce Arians ever.
I think I'm overcorrecting, by the way, because you're always like 800 higher than I am.
Yeah, I've been like 200 to 300 lower than you this week. I think Jones is like worth about 67, potentially a little bit higher. He's 72. That's not out of play by any means. I think that's fair. Again, we prefer David Montgomery relative to the salary and Cam Akers, but 72 is low enough still to keep Ronald Jones in play. And I think that if we're setting, because I do this every week, like if we're setting Ronald Jones's most relevant sample, it is now just week 14, correct?
Probably.
Yeah, I think so. Because like the making Fournette inactive to me is a major signal that I want to react to. So maybe 67 is too low, but I think that's kind of, where I'm at. Let's move now to the Cardinals at the Giants. And for the first time in about a month, Kyler Murray looked a little bit like himself. There were sprinkles of old Kyler in there. He ran 13 times for 47 yards. He had 15 rush attempts combined in his previous 3 games. The throwing still was not great, which is why it's not full Kyler yet. He had a 5.4-yard ADOT, average depth of targets, which is how far the throws go beyond the line of scrimmage on average. He was above average in terms of efficiency, but just barely. But the lack of running was hurting him and hurting this offense earlier. And adding that back in jacks up the appeal in this offense. So I'm bumping the Cardinals back up a bit. Still not like great with the passing offense. We'll talk about that in a second, but going to bump the overall offense up if Kyler's going to run. The biggest benefactor of that might be Kenyon Drake. He had 23 carries and 1 target here, added another short rushing touchdown. And since returning from his injury, Kenyon Drake is at 22 adjusted opportunities per game. He has 82 yards per game, but 45% of the team's red zone carries or targets. Like, that's pretty good usage for a guy who is usually in his salary range. There are still obviously limitations, but I've been using Drake a decent amount recently. Like, he's always been at least a sprinkle type guy. I think he keeps solidifying that. I'm not bumping the arrow up too much, but I think that with the offense looking better right now, I can feel better about him than I did previously. With Murray showing life again, DeAndre Hopkins was relevant. He had 11 targets. Nobody else had more than 5. Christian Kirk had 4. That's the same as Dan Arnold. Kirk also did not get any deep targets, while Hopkins had 3. And Arnold has a deep target in 3 straight and a red zone target in 4 straight, but no. I'm going to put the arrow down on Christian Kirk. We love Christian Kirk on this podcast, but with the offense being less vertical, it's not leaning into his strengths. And that's a downside for sure. It's hard for him to put up points. Arrow's up on Hopkins from where it was, though I've generally been lower on him, so it's not saying a whole lot. Arnold, meanwhile, ran a route on just 17 of 44 dropbacks. Seems like he's running routes at opportune times, but I would not expect him to keep the scoring pace up. So I'm not going to buy Dan Arnold, but I think that arrow up on Kenyon Drake and DeAndre Hopkins, which is noteworthy with the Eagles next week, a situation where we can definitely use pieces of the offense. Getting Daniel Jones back was definitely good for the Giants, but Jones was not at full health. You can kind of tell he was still pretty bad. And he was still big for the opposing defense and special teams for daily fantasy, which we have to keep in mind. He took 6 sacks here and lost 11.27 passing net expected points. You can still go at defenses facing them, especially if he's less mobile. And we shouldn't get too excited about the offense, even if it is better under Jones, than it is under McCoy. They didn't have the ball that much, so the volume was pretty low across the board. I think it's noteworthy, though, that Darius Slayton had 8 targets with 3 deep. That was compared to 5 for Sterling Shepard and 4 for Evan Ingram. Slayton, early in the year, was getting a lot of deep balls, and he was really good on them. Like, he was a good deep ball receiver. Jones was a good deep ball passer early on. And then Slayton got hurt. He played through it, but if he's healthier now, it's possible he starts to regain some of that form. So I'm going to keep Ingram first because he fills tight end, and I still like the usage there. But I am okay putting Slayton above Sterling Shepard because I think that Slayton's path to yardage upside is more obvious. But again, don't expect this to be the world's best offense. Bumping it up for sure with Jones, but like still not at full strength yet. And I'm going to put Slayton second behind Ingram. Wayne Gallman had his usual role, both in the good and the negative sense. He had 12 carries and 4 targets. He lost a short touchdown to Dion Lewis. That's because they were in hurry up, so I wouldn't read into that touchdown for Lewis. But we also saw Goldman lose red zone usage to Alfred Morris last week. He has capped upside. His floor is not bad, but the path to his ceiling is pretty tough there. So Goldman, he's fine. I can't use him if he's more than 6,000. I can't use him as a core play, but he's fine. He has a floor. It's whatever. That's kind of all I can say about that. I want to talk to you about the Cardinals offense, though. Brandon, we've been talking about the lack of aggression from a passing perspective for them for a while, but now we have Kyler Murray's rushing back. How are you feeling about Kyler specifically heading into Week 15 against Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, this team hasn't been that vertical all season. They haven't been quite as bad since they've been more horizontal since he hurt his shoulder, but they haven't really been slinging it constantly to start the season. So I think that I'm less concerned about the ADOT for him and just much more concerned about the rushing, because that gives him just kind of not unmatchable, but that puts him back in that elite tier. And if he's, I love Christian Kirk, but I don't need to play Christian Kirk. If I can play Kyler and DeAndre Hopkins together, that's a very high upside stack. I know it is a significant portion of my salary cap, but with all these backs, this is now much more doable. So yeah. I'm way higher on Murray and Hopkins after seeing this. Was late to it, but
yeah,
better late than never, and better late than too early too.
Right. I'd rather be late when there's a justifiable reason to be out, and the shoulder injury and the lack of rushing is a justifiable reason to be out. And it's not like Murray blew up. So I think that might be a positive here, because maybe we can get in before the public gets back in and use him next week. Name that salary for Kyler Murray against the Eagles.
Oh, sorry, I just saw it. You never asked me about quarterbacks.
I know, but
you kind of name it, because I already know it.
83.
He's 8,000.
Okay, I'll take that. I think maybe 83 was too low. If I guess no, because he was justifiably 9,000 earlier. We're downgrading him a bit, so maybe 85 or so.
Either way, he's going to be one of the better quarterback plays.
And he's someone we'll use
if that rushing comes back
in Week 15.
If the Eagles have some life, then
they might. Who can say? They might. Let's move now to Tennessee at Jacksonville. Our boy,
one of these teams had life.
Yeah, Mike Lennon. DJ Shark got 9 targets. Let's not discuss what happened on those targets, please. What'd you see here with Derrick Henry being good to us once again?
Yeah, Mike Glennon got benched for Gardner Minshew, but I am not going to talk about the Jaguars first. I'm just going to talk about the Titans first and talk about that later. Derrick Henry did his thing, 215 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 26 rushing attempts, 2 targets. So there's not a whole lot more to say than that. He's one of the few backs with this level of upside. I won't say he's the only back, but not many. He might be the only back who I would actually not be. If he gets 200 rushing yards, I'm not surprised. If anyone else, even a Dalvin, gets to 200 rushing yards, because Dalvin
doesn't have the blow up.
He's more of the the scrimmage yards, all purpose, not all purpose, but scrimmage yards. So
right.
But anyway, I don't need to talk about Derrick Henry that much. If he's in a good matchup, he's amazing. If they trail, as we saw last week, there still are concerns. But I mean, I think that's honestly the extent to which we should go with analysis on Derrick Henry.
They face the Lions next week.
Yeah, so
I really hope Matthew Stafford is healthy enough to play that game, but like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So Henry's only flaw, and there's been like multiple targets in I guess 4 of the past 5, but it just comes down to whether they trail or not. Ryan Tannehill had an efficient day on 24 attempts, 212 yards, 2 touchdowns. The majority of that yardage went to A.J. Brown, who had 112 on 9 targets and a touchdown. Nobody else had more than 3 targets, including Corey Davis. That might sound obvious, but Davis had a target lead over Brown since week 7 when they were both playing together. In that span now, Brown is back up to lead with 25% of the targets. It's 7.1 per game, which isn't amazing. But if you weight that for the red zone and downfield work, he's closer to 8.4, 8.5 targets worth. Davis is still close behind, even though there was a big gap this week. 23% of the targets with 6.8 targets per game, which is, again, is not great, but he gets more downfield work right now than A.J. Brown. So he has kind of a better weighted target number, barely at 8.6. So like, yeah, Brown blew up, and we know that Brown of the two has the bigger, like the higher probability to blow up, but I'm definitely not out on Corey Davis because of the bigger sample. And they're kind of like an early season DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett for me, because they'll get half of the targets for this team, basically. Pretty efficient quarterback. I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but I think that's kind of how I view this duo. I hope we get a salary decrease on Davis. He got up to $6,800, but I would imagine the workload is not like 3 targets or moving forward. I think it'll be closer to what we saw over a much larger sample. So, and this team, I recapped this right after the Buccaneers, and I was like, it seems so easy to stack because like Tannehill can put up big games, and he's going to go through A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. It's going to go through Derrick Henry. It's 4 guys. It's not 6 or 7. That makes me feel happy. As you already mentioned, they play the Lions next week, so I don't know. It's a really easy team to stack, and I like
Get those ribs healthy, Matthew Stafford, please.
Yeah,
come through, baby.
Mike Glennon, 85 yards on 23 attempts against a not good pass defense. So.
I started him in the Scott Fish Bowl this week and got negative points and deserved negative points.
Yeah, but sometimes in that league you have to do something. But
Joe Burrow ruined me. I miss you, Joe. Come back.
Gardner Minshew came in, was a bit better on the season now. He's at 0.10 passing net expected points per drop back compared to 0.01 for Glennon, negative 0.21 for Jake Luton. So Minshew, even though you and I are not his biggest supporters, is the best quarterback so far this season for the Jaguars, even though he's below the league average. He is around league average in ADOT, though, so perhaps that's enough, and the efficiency should get better for the pass catchers, which, as DJ Chark has showed us the past 2 weeks, is important. The targets flowed through Keelan Cole, who had 12. Laviska Shenault had 11. DJ Chark had 9, but just 2 catches for 14 yards. He had 2 catches on 7 targets for 41 yards last week, so not a whole lot of that catch rate is pretty low, I guess 25%. But combined, the Jaguars quarterbacks were 1 for 11 on downfield attempts in Week 14. Of those downfield attempts, though, Keelan Cole had 5, Chark had 3, Shenault actually got 2, which is a little abnormal for him. I was on Chark again this week for the downfield work that we saw a week ago, but it was the same story, just really inefficient on his targets. Maybe I'm still overrating him, but I think there's probably positive regression in his future, so I'm not out on DJ Chark.
I'm not out. I'm not out either. I think that like the reason that I can't get too excited is that even when Minshew was starting earlier this year, like Chark was like inconsistent. They had spread out targets, so like he's a better quarterback for the team. It's just like, is that going to lead to Chark doing anything? I don't know. And like it's a bummer because I like DJ Chark. Just it's tough.
What's his salary?
I don't care against the Ravens.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
You can't pay me to use a player against that Ravens defense.
Yeah, I have that. That's like I have a note on James Robinson being fine. Yeah. And then my next note is I won't have any Jaguars against the Ravens. James Robinson, 12 carries, 4 targets, 83 total yards. The floor is like good in a worst case scenario, but I don't know if James Robinson's going to win you many tournaments, but when they're not playing the Ravens, he's going to be good. So hopefully they put up a dud this week, and then we get Robinson at a better salary.
I would take that for sure, because 8,000 was tough on that offense, but at a lower salary, his workload is amazing, and it's been so good for so long. We can feel great about it. So hopefully, I'd agree they get pasted. Although I need him in Dynasty, so maybe not pasted too bad. We'll see. We're going to talk about a big win for the Denver Broncos here in just 1 second. But first, if you are excited about that Denver Bronco win and a Colorado listener, FanDuel, Bud Light, and the Denver Broncos have partnered together to create the Bud Light Pick and Kick bonus with one goal in mind: to give you more ways to win this NFL season. The program is simple. For every field goal and extra point the Broncos kicker makes, your favorite Brandon McManus, makes against the Buffalo Bills on December 19th, fans who placed a money line bet of at least $25 on the game will receive a $3 bonus added to their FanDuel Sportsbook account. That is for every kick that he makes. If McManus kicks 3 field goals and 3 extra points, that's $18 in bonus cash. December 19th is right around the corner, so crack open a Bud Light, download the FanDuel Sportsbook mobile app, and place your bet today. Eligibility restrictions apply. That's on the Saturday slate, too. I'm sure you're glad that you don't have to worry about Brandon McManus anymore. Anyway, let's talk here about Denver at Carolina. I never build around defenses. On Sunday, I had only Carolina and Dallas, and the Dallas side was good. Carolina was not. I think I had like 65%. That's not good. Don't do as I say, not as I do. Don't do that. It did not work out because my guy Drew Lock made me pay. How dare I doubt my boy? He had 0.40 passing net expected points per dropback. For this day, and this day only, he was Patrick Mahomes. Lock didn't go
there has to be in Slack messages from you where you equate Drew Lock to Patrick Mahomes.
I don't think there is. I've seen those comparisons, and they made me squeamish. Even as a Drew Lock person, I have compared him to Josh Allen, not Patrick Mahomes. So you can look. Do you see anything? I need to know if this is true because I would feel very bad about myself.
I made the joke that we were updating our database.
Yeah.
And I said that you wanted Drew Lock's name to be changed to Patrick Mahomes.
But I haven't said it. I'm going to search Twitter after this because I have to make sure this is not anywhere.
You can argue that there are 5-star quarterbacks. Lock, Mariota, Mahomes in that order.
What was that one wrong? What is that from?
I don't know. It's from May.
Okay, that makes sense. Never mind. I don't think I've ever made that comparison. I think he's more like Josh Allen, but like early career Josh Allen, not current Josh Allen.
You said contrast that to the AFC West, which has 3-star quarterbacks. I said Mahomes, Tyrod, and Mariota.
No.
And then I said and Lock, and then you corrected me.
Yeah.
So
I forgot about Tyrod, though. That was my bad. Yeah. I should have included in that discussion. Forget Derek Carr and Justin Herbert. It's all about Tyrod and Drew Lock and Marcus Mariota. Anyway.
And you had Jordan Ta'amu in that list in the top 5.
Oh, rest in peace. Lock didn't go deep as much here. That's where he generally gets himself in trouble. I would doubt this amounts to anything, but he has talent, so we shouldn't entirely write it off. If they decide to keep it a more intermediate game, he's actually kind of good on like intermediate balls. Just like it's the deep balls. Like he's such a D-gaffer in not a good way. If they can cut back on that a little bit, it would make the offense less fun, but it'd make him more efficient. So keep an eye on that. Noah Fant left early with a sickness, but they threw just 27 times, so the volume was super muted. Nobody had more than 5 targets. What's noteworthy that KJ Hamler had 3 of the 5 deep targets, and he had 2 touchdowns. When they can run, they'll likely elect to do so because Locke isn't going to hurt them there. So there are concerns around the passing offense when they can afford to not throw. We should keep that in mind. I would still rank Jerry Jeudy highest here, but Hamler should at least be on our radar if we need a super low salary play, and we will on Saturday. So KJ Hamler is definitely in play for that slate. You can ignore the backfield on full slates. Unfortunately, it's not a full slate next week, so I guess you'll have to consider them. Gordon's above Lindsey, but neither's that great. So Hopefully you can find other. Oh, man. The Bills don't have any usable running backs either.
Nope.
Okay, we have Mike Davis and Aaron Jones. We're fine. With no DJ Moore, the targets were predictably concentrated for Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel. Anderson led with 12 targets. Samuel had 8. Nobody else had more than 6. Both those guys had 3 red zone targets, but Samuel actually had a red zone rush attempt again, along with 3 deep targets. Anderson had just 1 there. I'm still going to put Robbie first because the raw target total is so good, but Samuel isn't that far behind, and I'm very into both if DJ Moore misses more time. So it's Robbie 1, and like Samuel I think is closer to a 1B than he is a flat-out 2, like a tier below Robbie. I think they're both decently even. We did see a Mike Davis revival here, kind of. He had 11 carries and 6 targets. That is 23 adjusted opportunities. But he had 4 red zone chances and turned it into 2 touchdowns. He had 93 yards from scrimmage. He had been struggling there quite a bit previously. I am still likely to be lower on Davis than the consensus. His snap rate did rebound to 73%, which is good. It's decent play, especially in a 2-game slate, but I'm not like getting too itchy to use him yet. There are still concerns in the profile there. Brandon, let's talk about Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel, because depending on when DJ Moore tested positive, he might be out for week 15 as well. Name that salary for Curtis Samuel. We can't because we don't have the Saturday slate up yet, but like hypothetically, name that salary for Curtis Samuel.
I mean, it'll probably be a little skewed because it's a 2-game slate, but let's say that game was on the main slate. He was 59 this week. I would bump him up, and Robbie was 65. Mm-hmm. I'd probably put them both around 65. I'd say it should be higher, but
yeah,
I still have some concerns just with this offense in general, and it's hard to put them close to 7,000 because we know that like Allen Robinson's around 7,000. So I mean, maybe 65 is a little low.
Yeah, I was thinking 7,000 for Robbie and 67 for Samuel.
I wouldn't play them at that.
Okay, I would. I think the workload is really good. I agree with you that like the offense is not the best, and like that's definitely a concern. But like volume is volume, and they're getting high leverage looks.
Yeah,
and it's hard for me to say no to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll like it's tough because on the 2-game slate, I will play a ton of both of them.
Yeah,
but if they were on the main slate, I mean, we're getting into like territory where I would try to play other guys.
Okay, let's move now to the Jets at the Seahawks. We talked on Thursday about how if Denzel Mims could not go, it would likely lead to destruction for the Jets, and oh, buddy, did it. What did you see here?
I'm just gonna get the Jets out of the way. They lost by 37. They put up 3 points. They had 185 yards, 3.6 yards per play. Sam Darnold had 132 yards on 26 attempts. No skill position player had more than 6 targets, more than 8 carries, or more than 50 yards. No. They play the Jets next, or the Rams next week.
What salary would you want to pay for Brashad Perriman if Brashad Perriman were facing the Jets? Like if we had an inter-squad scrimmage. Could we use Brashad Perriman then?
Who's his quarterback?
Is the defense bad enough to make the Jets' offense relevant? This is what I want to know.
Probably, but I don't know.
They get the Rams next week, so it doesn't matter. But
yeah, like
I want to see a Jets inter-squad scrimmage before the end of the year. I want that pretty badly.
I would not watch that. I'm going to talk about the Seahawks now. It was a bounce-back game for Russell Wilson to a degree. I think it was either this week or last week I said, yeah, Russ can still get to 4 touchdowns on like 28 attempts. We've seen him do it. He got 4 touchdowns on 27 attempts, but just 206 yards, like 22-ish FanDuel points or something. So it didn't really matter. Like it's a good game, but at his salary, it didn't do enough. The efficiency was good, but there were still more carries with 36 than dropbacks with 33. It's become the norm with this team. This backfield was split again between Chris Carson and Carlos Hyde. Carson had 12 carries, Hyde had 15. The snaps were 45% to 44% for Carson after being 58 to 25 in favor of Carson last week. If there was a spot for one of these guys to have a big game, it was probably this week, and they didn't. so I'm out on the backfield. But I'll jump back into the passing game here. Don't know why I wrote it in that order, but it's a long night. I think I just wanted to get through it this game, honestly. DK Metcalf had his share, as usual, 8 targets, 61 yards and a touchdown, despite getting banged up early. Tyler Lockett, Chris Carson, David Moore all had 5 targets as well. Over the past 4 weeks, with his team scaling back the pace and pass rate, if you look at their plays, their passes and rushes on plays where their pre-snap win probability was between 20 and 80%, so kind of removes garbage time. They're 26th in pace, 19th in pass rate. It's a different team than what we had to start the year. Metcalf still has 25% of the targets. That's 8.5 targets per game, with 2.3 downfield targets and a red zone target per game. He's still fine, but Lockett's down to 20% of the targets. He has 1 combined downfield and red zone target per game. Then it's Chris Carson at 12% of the targets. There's a theory that I've seen on Twitter that Lockett's just not 100% right now, which makes sense.
Yeah.
His ADOT's 5.8 yards in this span. Metcalf's at 13.6. So I can really only use Metcalf. I don't even really want to use Russell Wilson right now. But we've come a long way since the start of the season, but I'm really just interested in Metcalf. And they play Washington next week at 1 p.m. Washington's a good defense. I'll have some FOMO Metcalf probably, but other than that, I don't like this offense in that matchup that much at first glance.
And I think that this, from a process perspective, this game symbolized why we are lower on projected blowouts, because what we say is the odds they pay off are high, the odds they post a slate busting number are low. And that's exactly what it's they won by 37 and you didn't get a big game, a huge game out of anyone.
Yeah.
So I think that from a process perspective, when we talk about this, you can get the Chiefs against the Jets in that one game, but the Seahawks aren't the Chiefs from a pass rate perspective, from an efficiency perspective either. So that's why we talk about that. This is kind of the concern here. You're not going to take down a bunch of tourneys with that sort of output, and that's why we prefer to target closer games. Let's move now to Indianapolis at Las Vegas, and we have never really been able to feel secure with Jonathan Taylor, but it seems like we should now. He had 20 carries for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's on top of 2 targets, and Taylor has now had 114 or more yards from scrimmage in 3 straight games. He's been effective, and they are rewarding him with volume. And I think, finally, Brandon, we have a Colts player we can actually trust, TRUST, in DFS for the first time all year. I will ask you to name that salary in just a second, but Jonathan Taylor, all aboard, baby. I am not as trusting of T.Y. Hilton, but he's clearly not the same player he was earlier in the year. He had 86 yards and 2 touchdowns on 7 targets. Nobody else had more than 5 targets. In the 5 games since he returned from his injury, Hilton has 19.5% of the overall targets. Pittman's at 17%, but Hilton has 41% of the deep balls. He has multiple deep targets in 3 of the past 4 games, 81, 110, and 86 yards the past 3 games. So clearly Hilton is the top guy on this team, and he's in consideration. Not exactly eager to roster him yet, but I am open to it, which I was not before. So I'm okay taking Pittman off my radar for now. This team is Taylor, Taylor's good. Hilton in consideration, but not someone I really want to use. And it's nice to finally have clarity on this team. I've probably used Nelson Aguilar more than anybody else on the planet this year, and it finally paid off for once. He had 100 yards and a touchdown on 9 targets. 3 of those targets were deep. 3 were in the red zone. And that's why I wanted to use Aguilar, is because he's been getting those kinds of targets all year long. So it's not a situation where we need to fade it now. We can keep on buying despite what will likely be a salary increase. Darren Waller, 10 targets again for 75 yards. So the yardage was there again. I'm going to solidify Aguilar as being an option. I'm going to bump Waller up even a tiny bit more because he had yardage once again this week. That's encouraging. Josh Jacobs said he wasn't going to play. Clearly he was trolling, but Twitter was a mess for the entire 3 to 4 p.m. hour. Finished with 13 carries and 5 targets. The 5 targets were actually the most he's gotten since week 1, but he ran just 14 routes, so it doesn't seem like he got a major role shift. I think it's a status quo on Jacobs, but I feel like we can feel better, assuming that he's at full health now from here on out. And I think that's a good thing at least, but it's still not a perfect profile by any means. Let's talk about Jonathan Taylor, though, Brandon. He's been good. He's getting rewarded with volume. So name that salary for Jonathan Taylor in Week 15. They get Houston, by the way. Should clarify that.
That changes everything.
It does.
Number that comes to mind in that matchup is like 76.
I thought 78. So we're very close.
He played 56% of the snaps. We basically, I think he's going to have like an effective cap of like 60% of the snaps, and that is a concern. We know
he's
how
74.
Good. Okay.
So, between Cam Akers, David Montgomery, and Jonathan Taylor, we've got legit mid-range options for Week 15, and thinking ahead to Week 15 right now, I'm pretty sure that'll be one of the big stories of the main slate is sorting through which of the mid-range guys you covet most and how you rank them, because I feel like they're going to be the big talking point for this week.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we already talked about both these guys, but Derrick Henry's 10-2, Dalvin Cook's 9,400.
Oh, wow.
And then third is Alvin Kamara at 7,800.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like Henry's in his own salary tier, Dalvin, and then everyone else is mid-range anyway.
Wow.
At best.
That's really interesting.
So it's going to be quite a slate for running back next week.
Oh, yeah, because there's no Nick Chubb, there's no Aaron Jones, kind of those 8,000 guys, and James Robinson's facing the
no Eckler.
Ravens. Yeah, no. Oh, man. My heart.
No Josh Jacobs for wherever he would be.
Okay. That's going to be a talking point. I think we'll probably do a full trend on the mid-range guys for next week. I think that would be worthwhile for Thursday. Let's move now to Green Bay at Detroit. The Lions, they fought hard. Matthew Stafford banged up here, but what'd you see in this one?
Yeah, 55 total points, 31-24. I actually did the math in my head, so I was thinking maybe it was wrong, but I think it's right.
If you bet the over in this game, hopefully you got it early in the week because it was 54.5 initially, and I think it closed at 55.5. So T's and P's to those who got it at 55.5.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers came through, 290 yards, 3 touchdowns, no sacks, no picks. He's been not really taking many sacks, not throwing picks. He's back. And as usual, Davonte Adams got his targets. He had 10 of them, 7 catches, $115, and a 56-yard touchdown with really nobody covering him. I'm not a film guy. I'm not a football coach, but you don't single cover Davonte Adams, and really no one was that close to him. I don't understand how that stuff happens, but again, that's why I'm
Lions, man.
Just recapping.
The ghost of Matt Patricia still looming large on the defense.
I mean, that was a strange. I understand if Davante gets you, but that was kind of embarrassing.
Yep.
Marquez Valdes-Scantling had 6 targets for 85 yards and a touchdown, and then Robert Tonyan had 5 for 36 and a touchdown. If we look at this team in games with Davante and Allen Lazard healthy, which Lazard hasn't been getting the usage, but he historically has been someone that Aaron Rodgers likes to throw to. So that's why I think this is the most relevant sample of 5 games. Davante has 32% of the targets, 11.2 per game, all sorts of high leverage looks. He's amazing. Don't really have to talk about him more than that. Behind him, though, the best target share does belong to Allen Lazard at 11.8% in these games. Then it's 11.2% for Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Robert Tonyan. Valdes-Scantling, though, has a 19.5-yard average depth of target, which is wildly high. He's getting downfield work. He has 2 downfield targets per game in the sample. Tonyan at least is a tight end, so I'd honestly go with Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Robert Tonyan over Allen Lazard right now.
I would also say that Tonyan might be even a bit higher than that, just because in week 1 he had no targets. He played a lot of snaps, but no targets. And he's developed more of a rapport with Rodgers since then. I think that with Rodgers that kind of matters. And Tonyan has 5 targets in 4 straight, in all 4 with Lazard back. So I kind of think that Tonyan is not desirable at tight end, but I'm very willing to use him, and I did use him this week again. But it didn't really work necessarily. But I'm okay with it.
Yeah, that's effectively where I am with him.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying.
I thought you were going to come in and be like,
no,
you're way too low on Robert
If
Tonyan.
I am manually setting a most relevant sample, I am lopping off week 1.
Okay, then in that sample, he has 15% of the targets, which is 5 per game.
Boom. He goes from being Tyler Kroft to being Travis Kelce. Raise Robert Tonyan up. Elevate him to the sky.
He has five targets per game in this.
5 targets in every game. At least 5 targets in every game. If I phrase it like that, it sounds a lot better. Go ahead.
Okay, I think Jim's higher in Robert Tonyan than I am. But
Bobby Tons, baby. Bobby Tons.
Aaron Jones did not get a featured back role. He split 25 carries, 15 to 10 with Jamal Williams, had 3 targets for 6 yards. We've seen Jones be a secondary asset, he's more of an ancillary jabroni with Davonte healthy. He's not quite that, but whenever Davonte is healthy, this is his team. So it's primarily a situation where you have to figure out the odds he can break a long touchdown or score twice in the red zone because he's efficient. The touches, like the volume's just not really on par with the other high salaried backs. He did play 70% of the snaps though, to Williams getting just 30. It's been roughly like a 65-35 split since both came back, since both have been back in week 10. So I'm not necessarily out on Aaron Jones. He's going to be a standout play on the 2-game slate, but if they were on the full slate, even against the Panthers, I would keep my expectations in check just from what we've seen from Aaron Jones overall. Matthew Stafford got hurt late, so we're going to have to keep an eye on that situation. He's getting x-rays on his ribs. I don't have an update yet. But he played almost all the game, was pretty decent. 244 yards and a touchdown on 34 attempts, but nobody had a big game as a receiver. TJ Hawkinson did get to 11 targets for 43 yards and a touchdown. Marvin Jones had 48 yards on his 8 targets before he got hurt late. Danny Amendola had 7 targets. It's usually those 3 getting targets without Kenny Golladay, and that's what we saw again. I don't know the extent to which Marvin Jones is hurt, but I'll just proceed as if he's going to play next week. In 7 games now without Golladay, but with Danny Amendola, Jones leads the team with 19% of the targets. He's at almost a 12-yard ADOT with a lot of downfield work, 2.3 targets per game downfield. Hawkinson has 18% of the targets. Amendola's at 16%. Marv remains relevant, but like not perfect and not that necessarily desirable. But with Matthew Stafford playing better overall, I mean, this wasn't an amazing game, but this offense has more life. I think Marv's relevant, but again, has flaws. I think Hawkinson is honestly the best non-elite tight end in the game right now. So if you cut off Kelce and then however you want to view Darren Waller, I think Hawkinson's a clear number 3 based on his volume and his yardage upside. DeAndre Swift did lead the backfield here. Had a limited role overall, 7 carries, 5 targets for 50 total yards coming off of his illness and a concussion. Played 53% of the snaps. He's the only back we would want in this backfield. If this is what we get, he's going to be hard to justify in DFS. But I think you have to assume the workload gets better the farther he is removed from the illness and the concussion. Play the Titans next week, so I think Swift could be a very, very interesting piece next week. It's just you have to figure out, is he going to play more or is this more what we're going to see because of what he's been going through?
I think he's one of the guys you play based on the injury report. Like if he is not even listed on Wednesday, full speed ahead. I think then we go back to what he was prior. But if he's still limited or – because he was full on Friday. So that makes me think that maybe he'll be full Wednesday. Like migraines are no joke. Like that's a tough situation to deal with. We saw Percy Harvin deal with those. So like if he can be healthy, then I'll feel really good about him. And I hope he is because like that would suck. So I want to watch him be full DeAndre Swift. So keep an eye on the injury report for the Lions. If he is not there Wednesday and Matthew Stafford's good to go and Marv is good to go, maybe we get Kenny Golladay back, that could be a really fun game. But that's maybe optimistic, but like I'm hoping for it. Let's have one more fun game on this slate. Let's move now to New Orleans at Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts got the win here for the Eagles, and I would say he exceeded my expectations. He averaged 0.10 passing net expected points per dropback. He also was not sacked on 30 dropbacks. I'm not sure the sack part will skip, but the rushing should. He had 18 carries for 106 yards. That is a really juicy rushing floor, and he's throwing enough where he can actually move the needle a bit there too. That's good for him against a really tough defense. Like, again, he exceeded my expectations. They had just 26 targeted throws, though, and nobody had more than 6 targets. So if you use Hurts, it might be best just to use him by himself. I think Michael Leone established the run, took down a tournament with naked Hurts this week. Like, that might be the optimal way to, like, play things, because I'm not sure anyone in the passing game is going to get good enough volume to feel good about. But, like, Hurts by himself, pretty relevant, and he gets Arizona next week, so it's a good pass rush, and I'd be worried about him taking a lot of sacks there, so the Arizona defense is in play. But, like, I am bumping up my view of Jalen Hurts based on this game. I thought he played better than I thought he would. And the best news here is that Miles Sanders really came back to life. He had a long touchdown, finished with 115 yards rushing. He had 14 carries and 5 targets. That is 24 adjusted opportunities. His 81% snap rate was up 20 percentage points from where it was the previous 3 weeks. It was his first time topping 75% since week 5. So that may not stay, but he has been an efficient runner all year long. They just haven't run the ball for whatever reason. Like, I am pro establish the pass. Like, just throw, baby. But, like, they have been a more efficient rushing offense than a passing offense this year. And at some point, you got to just, like, run the football. So the stock is up for Miles Sanders. I am now willing to use him again in the right spots. So Miles Sanders back on the radar for DFS. Maybe not like great yet, but like better for sure. There was also a running back rebirth on the other side here because Alvin Kamara had 10 targets. He had 6 the first 3 games with Taysom Hill combined. When you add in his 11 rushes, that is 31 adjusted opportunities and 94 yards from scrimmage. Still not perfect, especially because it's hard to expect the 10 targets to stay around. But if Drew Brees does come back in week 15, we'd be able to buy back in on Kamara right away. So Kamara in consideration with Taysom Hill, but like if we get Drew Brees, oh baby. The problem is that Taysom Hill was not good, so we need Drew Brees. Taysom Hill finished with negative 0.02 passing net expected points per dropback. That drags him down to 0.02 in his 4 starts. Again, league average is about 0.14. His average depth of target for the full time is now down to 6.5, so he's not even chucking deep like he did in his first start. So we should upgrade this offense in a big way once Brees comes back, and I think that applies to all players. If Taysom keeps going, Michael Thomas is kind of an option. He had 8 targets here for 84 yards. That's fine. I just don't know what the upside is unless Taysom magically gets better. So I really want Drew Brees back next week, though that's not a lot. They're facing Kansas City. If we get Drew Brees, that game could have a lot of points. I know we make jokes about Drew Brees, but he would be a legitimate upgrade for this entire offense. But Brandon, I want to talk to you about the 2 running backs here. First, Miles Sanders gets good usage, gets a good snap rate. Jalen Hurts makes this offense look competent for once. Name that salary for Miles Sanders against the Cardinals.
7,000.
I was thinking 68 because I still think there is potential for this offense to be bad, given how bad the offensive line is, given how bad the pass catchers are. That's still a concern. So I'm not that much lower, but a little bit lower. But at 68, I'm willing to consider him, which was not the case previously. And he is 68 on the button. Okay, I'll take that for sure. I'm feeling okay about that. What about Alvin Kamara? I mean, we already know the salary, but like $7,800. Is that low enough? Let's assume Taysom starts again. Would you use Kamara at that salary in what could be a really fun game?
I would. He would be back on the menu because he got 10 targets, and that's where a lot of his value comes from. He is somewhat involved in the red zone. And, we saw 2 rushing touchdowns the past 2 games now for him. So that alleviates some of my concern, possibly that he doesn't score again. But, one thing you can do against the Chiefs is run the ball. So,
yeah. And I think that that's a script that sets up well for him, or they'll need him because they want the 1 seed. And if they lose, their odds of getting it go down quite a bit. So I think it'll be a heavy Kamara game. I really want Drew Brees to play though. I know it's a bad injury, but Drew, baby, let's go. Let's get you back out there for this one. Let's move now to Atlanta at the Chargers. Austin Eckler, a lot of yardage. awesome game, no touchdowns, but hey, I'll certainly take it. What did you see here?
Yeah, I like this game a lot, but then, Julio was out, so that lowered me a bit. And then the Chargers had a lot of injuries here in this game, but they won 20-17. Justin Herbert kind of got back on track, just 5.5 yards per attempt, which is below league average, but 0.25 passing net expected points per drop back, which is almost twice the NFL average. Just a 4.2 yard ADOT, though, and only 4.5% of his pass attempts were downfield. But again, there were some big injuries. I'm sure you could elaborate on this much more than I could. But Brian Bulaga played 3 snaps before leaving with a concussion. Trey Turner played 75% of the snaps, left with his own head injury. So I don't know the situation there. But
they've barely played this year. Like, they're both really good players. But like, the idea of pairing Brian Bulaga with this training staff is, in retrospect, the most horrifying thing that ever could have happened, because he was hurt all the time with Green Bay, and now he's with the Chargers. Like, I love Brian Bulaga. He's a really good player, but like, Herbert's been good without them the entire year, because Turner's been out most of the year too. So I don't think it changes things too much, but if they were to be healthy, A, probably shouldn't expect them to stay that way, but B, it would be an upgrade for the offense. So like, it's status quo, but if they were healthy, it'd be an upgrade.
Okay. So no upgrade.
Right. But no downgrade either.
Okay. Also, possibly a downgrade, though, for not having Mike Williams, who hurt his back after 2 snaps. That's not going to help. But what always helps is that Keenan Allen gets his. He had 10 targets and a touchdown. Did tweak his hamstring late, so keep an eye on that. It's a tight turnaround for their game on Thursday. Please, Keenan, be healthy for that game. Austin Eckler had 9 targets. Hunter Henry had 8. And then Tyron Johnson had 7. Looking at this team since week 12 with Eckler back, Eckler leads with 23% of the targets, which is 11.3 per game, 1.3 in the red zone. Then it's Keenan Allen at 22%, 1.3 downfield and red zone targets per game with 10.7 overall. I love Keenan if he's healthy. Please be healthy, Keenan. And then Hunter Henry and Mike Williams are sitting at 13%. But as far as like who might replace Mike Williams, Jalen Guyton led the receivers with all the receivers with 84% of snaps, and Tyron Johnson played 74%. But with no Williams, they could be relevant on the Thursday slate. Johnson had the better target share, 16% to 7%. Guyton got the deep shot between them. He's fast and gets a lot of downfield heaves, but I would lean Johnson if you're playing that Thursday slate. Eckler himself,
too, like, Guyton's been running routes all year, but hasn't like done anything with it. So like, you're probably right that like we shouldn't expect a major target increase if Williams misses, because it's not like Mike Williams' target share was like 11% in that time, so it's not like there are a ton of targets available either.
Yeah.
Although there is a Thursday through Saturday slate posted on FanDuel, and I want to play that.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Eckler will be in play on that for sure. 9 targets, just in that elite market share as a receiver. 15 carries to Kalen Ballage's 7. In terms of snap rate, he's now played 72%, 60%, and 60% in his 3 games back. As for red zone work, he got 2 red zone targets and had 2 of the 3 red zone carries in this game. He has to score eventually, I think. So that's very relevant for Thursday, especially if there's a Thursday to Saturday slate. That'll be fun. With no Julio, we saw Calvin Ridley get a lot of work, 11 targets, $124 and a touchdown. Behind him, only Russell Gage with 7 targets, had more than 3. And we saw a Laquan Treadwell touchdown because I had a lot of Russell Gage in Calvin Ridley. This team's just really thin on relevant DFS
Wait,
plays.
did you use them together to get the stack?
I probably had a
double dip
lineup with both of them because I stacked this game so much, but
double dip, baby. Just like when we had Jarvis and Odell together back against the Cowboys. That was the plan.
That was the plan. You had a prediction of a receiver to run Jefferson to Cook.
It was a
touchdown.
It was a Justin Jefferson to Dalvin Cook touchdown.
Yeah.
I'm going to count this. This counts.
The backfield's a clear no for this team. So again, not a whole lot to go to. But in games with Julio limited or out, Ridley has 26% of the targets, which is 9.7 per game, but weighted 13.5 because he's down 4.2 downfield targets. He's also involved in the red zone. Ridley without Julio has probably like a top 3 workload in football. Russell Gage has a solid enough 16% target share. Hurst is at 13%. He actually has a good number of 50-yard games, but doesn't have a whole lot else there. They play Tampa Bay next week.
I saw some tweets about Calvin Ridley's splits without Julio, and like they said they were down, but like one of those games he left early. It was the Green Bay game. The other ones, he just didn't have touchdown luck in his favor. He's had 110 or more yards in like 3 or 4 of those 6 games. Like you said, he's awesome. He just didn't have touchdowns break in his favor. Like you don't downgrade Calvin Ridley. Was
it fantasy point based?
Yes. He was like the wide receiver 2 versus the wide receiver 19 without Julio. Yeah.
Yeah. He had
a donut in one of those games because he left early.
That's tough.
So I think that you need to make sure you're looking at market shares and then sprinkling in output, like some look at output, but don't look at like fantasy points in smaller sample. Fantasy points are bad in a large sample. They're worse in a small sample.
Yeah. A 2-touchdown game can really, screw up a sample. But
indeed, I think that I'd agree with you across the board here. I think that like Hurst is at least like kind of interesting, but hopefully, I think I just want to play that Thursday through Saturday slate. That's my big takeaway here. Let's move to Washington and San Francisco. Washington got the win here, even though Alex Smith missed the second half. Smith doesn't have major damage to his leg, which is good, just like from a human perspective. So it's possible he's back out there next week, but I don't think it makes a big difference. Both he and Dwayne Haskins are at negative 0.07 passing net expected points per dropback this year. Haskins' average depth of target is about a yard higher. So even though he's low at around 6.5, like it's a little bit higher than Smith, probably doesn't really matter who starts here. I think it's about the same. With no Antonio Gibson, it was a split backfield here. J.D. McKissic had 11 carries and 4 targets. Peyton Barber had 12 carries and 3 targets. McKissic played well, but there's not a ton of upside there, so I'm good ignoring this backfield until Gibson is back. Like, if you use McKissic, I don't think that was a bad play, but like, I want guys with more obvious paths to upside, and he doesn't really have that. So like, he's fine, kind of like Wayne Gallman, where like there's a floor, the floor is good, but I'd rather go for the ceiling personally. Terry McLaurin finally had I guess finally is wrong because he had one last week too, but he had a bad game. 5 targets for 24 yards. He had just 14 last week, but before then he had been under 74 yards just twice. And part of it is the offense, but he's also been dealing with some injuries. McLaurin's not off the map, but I will lower him. He doesn't seem like the same player he was earlier in the year. If he starts getting in like full practices again on like Wednesday, then I'll bump him up because like they get Seattle next week, and I'd like to use him there, but I want to see the injury report first. So monitor the Washington injury report with regards to Terry McLaurin. Logan Thomas gets a bump up. He has 7 targets in 2 straight games, and he gets enough high leverage stuff to have access to a ceiling. So McLaurin is still the top option here, but the gap between him and Thomas is tightening for me. Deebo Samuel unfortunately got hurt again, hurt his hamstring, and the offense was bad without him. Nick Mullins lost 0.39 passing net expected points per dropback. That's hideous. That's like Ryan Finley stuff. Not quite as bad as Ryan Finley, but it's close enough. They think I don't like CJ Beathard, but they have to consider CJ Beathard at some point. He loves taking sacks. He loves throwing picks, but it wouldn't make this offense much better, but like you got to give it a shot. And that this offense is bad right now, and that hurts everyone. But Brandon Ayuk might get enough volume to overcome that if Deebo misses time. Ayuk had 16 targets with 3 deep. Disgusting volume. In the 2 games with Ayuk and without Deebo and Kittle, Ayuk has 36% of the team's targets. He had 14 in one and 16 in this one. So yeah, the offense will be bad, but we can still go here for Ayuk. I think he'd be the only pass catcher to target. The backfield is split again, which is a bummer. Raheem Mostert got banged up, but had 14 carries and 4 targets. Jeff Wilson had 11 carries and 3 targets, but he gobbled up most of the red zone work. On a bad offense, that's not going to cut it. So for right now, Ayuk is the only guy we should go out in DFS on this team. Everybody else is really tough to trust. But Brandon, let's go back to the Washington side here. Terry McLaurin struggling, but facing the Seahawks next week. How do you want to handle guys who are like that, where you know they can have good games, but they've been struggling and there's potential explanation for why those struggles have been happening?
You just have to assess your risk tolerance, I think, and adjust it for the offense. Like McLaurin's been good. We know that. But what are the odds that he puts up a truly slate-changing performance? I mean, he's maxed out at 22 FanDuel points. 2 games is 22, 21, 18 and a half. I love Terry McLaurin. I loved him last year when I probably shouldn't have. There's a lot of contention between us. But I think if we adjust for everything right now, he's probably capped at like 20 FanDuel points, which is amazing at a 6,900 salary. But I don't think he's really someone I feel like I have to play. So I'll probably have like Metcalf, Mclaurin mini stacks, but that's kind of all I would have in that game.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. So let's move now to the Sunday night game, which started off really bad, eventually got a little bit better at the end, but still not great. Buffalo gets a win here. What'd you see between the Steelers and the Bills?
Josh Allen was kept in check from an efficiency standpoint, put up 0.02 passing and unexpected points per dropback on his 43 attempts. 238 yards against a tough pass defense. Still ran 6 times for 28 yards, giving him that Konami ability. Shout out to Rich Rebar. Lots of shouts to Rich.
Wow, 2-in-1 show. Good for Rich.
And he featured the top guys. Stephon Diggs had 14 targets, $130, and a touchdown. Cole Beasley, 10 targets for 41 yards. Gabriel Davis had 8 targets. But
don't you laugh at Cole Beasley. He has 4 100-yard games this year. He's a monster. How dare you?
4.1 yards per target in a game.
In this one game, no, he's the best.
That's funny.
Fair enough. I can see the point. You're right.
Dawson Knox had 7, and then nobody else had more than 1. So it was very concentrated here. And if we look at this team with no John Brown the past 3 games, Diggs is at 32% of the targets, which is the same as Davonte Adams' target share in his relevant sample. 11.3 targets per game. Not the most downfield work, just 1 per game, but Diggs is very, very good whenever they're in a better spot. That's very promising. Cole Beasley has a strong 23% target share. Actually, more downfield targets than Diggs, surprisingly, in this sample. And then Gabriel Davis is at 15% of targets, but 2 downfield targets per game, 1.7 red zone targets per game. So in terms of just targets per game, he's at 5.3. But if you kind of weight them, he's at 7.8 in terms of the value. So not the worst, and that's relevant because they play on Saturday, so it's a smaller slate. Diggs, of course, is still the man. Beasley has somewhat of a floor, somewhat of a ceiling with the downfield work. You and I are historically lower on Cole Beasley because he's historically been a low.
He was very kind to me on that 2-game Monday slate. No, I like Cole Beasley now. I'm a Beasley guy.
I said historically.
Yeah, but historically means in the past, right? I don't actually know what words mean.
Before 2020,
okay, yeah,
we've been low on Cole Beasley.
Cole Beasley sucked, but this is 2020 Cole Beasley. He's got that half sleeve tat now. He's a new man.
And then Gabriel Davis still getting high leverage looks, so that's relevant for that small slate. The running backs, tough scene. Zach Moss did have 13 of 20 running back carries. Devin Singletary had the other 7. Just a single target each. Moss, he's basically at a 60-40 like snap split. There's not a whole lot there. They're at the Broncos on Saturday at 4:30. I think I'd be the kind of wary of the backs even on that 2-game slate, to be honest. Ben Roethlisberger was bad here, negative 0.22 passing and unexpected points per drop back on his 37 attempts. Had some drop issues. It's not his fault there, but got sacked for the first time since week 9, which is fun. Not fun, but it's a fun stat. This is his first game with negative passing and unexpected points all season, but he's actually been average or worse than average in 4 straight games now on a per dropback basis, so that's concerning. And if we're going to see the efficiency dip, we need better target shares than what we got here. Juju Smith-Schuster and Deontay Johnson had 7, James Washington, Chase Claypool each had 6, and then Eric Ebron had 5, but nobody surpassed 55 yards. I do want to look at the past 2 weeks because we saw James Washington kind of get a role change. He played 54% of the snaps last week and then 81% this week, while Chase Claypool played 44% and 67% respectively. And Deontay Johnson got benched early. Played 80% of the snaps last week, 49% this week because of the dropped passes, which is something that Mike Tomlin said was possible if these guys are dropping passes. Still with that, with the lower snap rate, Johnson tied for the team lead with 7 targets. He has 21% of the targets over the past 2 games. It's kind of low, especially if the efficiency is going to be average at best, which it hasn't been even from Roethlisberger in the sample. The saving grace is that the Steelers are so pass-heavy that he has 19 targets in this span. They're first since they abandoned madness for a reason and started letting it fly in Week 7. So, like, that really helps these market shares look a lot better than they do on a percentage basis. Juju Smith-Schuster would probably be the number one here if Johnson falls because his snap rate was 100% on Sunday. He has a 19% target share. And then Eric Ebron actually has 18% of the targets. Claypool and Washington would probably eat into each other's workloads a bit. They have the same target share with Washington getting the better leverage the past 2 weeks. So before I ranked this passing game as like Deontay, Claypool, Juju, but now it might be Juju, probably still Deontay, Ebron, Washington, Claypool. So it's very different. And this is just a good reminder why full season market shares can be misleading. Kind of have to adjust. And that's why we do the show, baby.
I also really hope Deontay turns it around because, like, I know we've been lower on him than most on the podcast, but, like, it's not fun to watch athletes, like, struggle with the yips. Yeah. So I really hope he turns it around because, like, you know, that would not be fun to deal with. So we're rooting for Deontay. I think that Juju might be the best choice because, like, I still have concerns around the deep volume, but, like, if he's going to be on the field more, that matters. I think that you're right to bump Washington above Claypool, though, just because, like, Claypool, when Ben Roethlisberger asked for Washington to play more, it was at the expense of Claypool. So I love Claypool. I do not like the way they're using him right now. So I think that you're probably right there. And, like, Ebron has his drop issues too, but he's still playing. He's still getting volume. So I think that your ranking is probably right, but I think we're just kind of lower on this offense in general because, like, the target shares are kind of bad. That is all that we have for today. Any final thoughts for you, Brandon, before we close up shop and send it out to Thursday?
No, a lot of games to recap. I think we covered just about everything.
Dig into those mid-range backs. It's a fun week to talk about Cam Akers, Jonathan Taylor, all those guys, and we'll talk plenty about them on Thursday. That will be at 10 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page. So make sure you are subscribed to the FanDuel YouTube page. Also check us out on Twitch, Periscope, and other places as well. Live at 10 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page. Check us out there. It'll be up on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed immediately after. Make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Listener League should be posted later today. So find a link to that in the post up on numberFire.com or go to FanDuel.com/league/Listener League. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you on the Monday night slate and hopefully on the Thursday through Saturday slate as well. We'll talk again on Thursday to get you set for the main. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.